technology and business reporters at TOI, and both of us have been with TOI a long time. The two of us will moderate this discussion. Our discussion today is on how cloud and software as a service, SaaS, are redefining TV and OTT. The discussion is in association with Amagi. Amagi is a fantastic made in India company. And I have a terrible memory generally. If you ask me what I did in school and college or 10 years ago, I can barely remember anything. But I still remember the call I received in 2008 from someone who told me that a company called Amagi has been launched and could TOI write about it. At least one former senior TOI executive was at that time part of Amagi's board, if I remember correctly. And the pitch even then was very interesting. The person who called up said we have technology that will enable national TV channels to show different ads at the same time in different parts of the country. Maybe in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, you show something relevant to the south, but in Delhi and UP, you show something else. Amagi has come a long way since then. Things have changed dramatically. Things changed dramatically once it moved to the cloud, and they did it early on in 2014 when cloud was barely part of conversations. Today, a host of global broadcast networks use Amagi's technology, the likes of Discovery, Fox Networks, MGM, NBC Universal, Warner Media. Today, to talk about the cloud's impact on TV and OTT, we have with us Bhaskar Subramanian. Bhaskar is co-founder and CEO at Amagi. And we have with us Ashish Kolvalkar. Ashish is global head of HR at Amagi. Bhaskar will give us a general idea of the whole picture, the technology and all of that. And Ashish will talk about the kind of talent the space needs. Those who are viewing this can send in questions through the Facebook comment box. Shilpa and I will put them to Bhaskar and Ashish. So Bhaskar and Ashish, welcome to this show. Thanks a lot for coming in. And Bhaskar will start. He has a presentation that will take about 15-20 minutes. After that, we'll get into a Q&A. Bhaskar?
Yes. Hi, Sujit, and hi, Shilpa. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And hi, all who are watching this live. And it's going to be an exciting session because we're thinking of cloud and video. And we're going to talk about both two things which are very exciting that's happening in the world. All of us are starting to watch a lot of OTT content thanks to all this COVID scenario, working from home. And OTT is a very, very interesting proposition that's been evolving across the globe, and obviously in India that we've seen. And what we're calling it is really a marriage that happens, right? So literally a marriage that actually is happening in a SaaS haven. But that's more of a play with words for you. But the idea is that cloud and video are the two most exciting technologies coming together. And when you're evolving it and providing it as a software as a service model, it becomes an extremely attractive proposition for businesses going forward. And we're seeing it, and we're part of this whole trend. But today, what I'm going to cover is really kind of talk about, whenever we talk about what's happening behind all of that we're watching from a content standpoint. So again, if you look at it, what does this tell us? Because typically, all of us, when we look at it, when we talk about factories, mega factories, this is the vision that you get, right? I don't know if you've all watched Nat Geo or any of these programs. Mega factories means large factories with quite a bit of people, hardware, planes in this case, for example. What I've shown you could be automotive, it could be toys, it could be many things that you see. But again, what we don't understand is exactly the same sort of complexities are happening even in a business which is completely on a video business that's happening. What we see on our screen is a fairly straightforward click of an icon. You get into you get all your content today, be it OTT or in your television. But there's a whole slew of backend factory that's running. And what I'm going to tell you and kind of go through is kind of give you a peek into that factory, peek into the size of what's happening and the scale of what's happening. And I can guarantee you that it's actually as complex or more complex than the Boeing factory that you saw, mega factories that's starting to evolve. And that's not about Amagi, but as a whole industry and the media and entertainment industry, which is kind of evolving, is a very exciting phase. That's what I'm going to really kind of talk about today with you folks, right? What's the scale of watching? And I'm sure you've seen numbers before, but video watching is kind of tremendously increased. And thanks to internet is a key thing that we're seeing, right? And these are things that you would have, I don't know if you've seen it, but 500 million viewing hours every day. That's pretty much 500 million people watching it for 1 hour every day is what we have just about YouTube. And YouTube is only one part of the complete content consumption patterns across the globe today, for example. but just tells you the scale of the platforms and what's kind of evolving today. If you look at it, on YouTube today, 400 plus hours of content are uploaded per minute. You can see the sort of the scale that's happening per minute. That means so much of content is first getting created because of thanks to a lot of user generated content that's happening, right? So that's kind of driving whole stuff. Viewership is increasing. The content creation is also increasing in some sense. So now in the parlance of what we work on, for example, in all our systems, we don't talk about megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes. All of that's done. Now it's zettabytes. All our conversations are typically now towards saying, hey, what zettabyte is nothing but a trillion gigabytes. Just to give you a perspective, 125 million disks, which are 8 terabytes each. If you kind of stack it up, think about maybe it goes to the moon, is the sort of that's the sort of scale of content storage that's starting to happen today. Just the scale is tremendously humongous. We just don't see it because we only see a screen, but behind it is all these action happening. And there's all these hardware kind of coming together and whizzing around and trying to do things today for all of us. And just to give you sort of scale, internet obviously changed a lot of things, but internet is the pipe, which is the lifeline for all video. And just Netflix alone is taking 40% of all internet bandwidth in the US during peak hours. So at 8 p.m., when somebody's switching on the US, 40% of all internet bandwidth is video. And it's video is also a large sucker of bandwidth because, and we'll talk about it, right? Because it needs a lot of storage, a lot of streaming capability in terms of the bandwidth needs. And I'm sure all of you, when you are getting your plans from ISPs or from mobile devices, you always talk about what's my megabits per second that I need on my phones or on my devices at home. So that's the driver from a scale standpoint. Now, if you look at it from a scale standpoint, so there are big factories. There are like cloud factories that are coming up, right? So take every cloud vendor today, be it Amazon or Google or a Microsoft or an Alibaba, they're building gargantuan factories of server after servers, millions and millions of servers, which are sitting in. And beauty of this is it's all programmable. It's all accessible to all of us from anywhere across the globe. And that's driving this whole capability and change that's happening. So I want to kind of reorient you saying mega factories doesn't mean just large physical factories, but you're seeing this whole cloud factories evolving, which are completely invisible to our eyes. And but they give the power for us to peek into these factories whenever we need and do a lot of things that we can do, right? Just to give you some video fundamentals so that we're all clear. Typically, if you look at a video, video is nothing but what are we doing, right? It's exactly, I think humans understood how to create a video. What did we do in animations in those old days? I don't know how many of you have seen cartoons earlier day and what you've seen in the childhood days. Cartoons used to be created by sketching one at a time, and then you create an animation. Actually, you can drive this through a paper. You'll see the animation working. Exactly the same mechanism is what technology is nothing. We are mimicking nature. We're mimicking understanding of human capabilities. So what we have done, we've taken the same sort of mechanism and created what we call as a scene. If you look at a scene like this on the top, right? So you have a mouth and then something is getting into the mouth. What have we done? We cut this into the animations into pieces. These are called frames in the video jargon. And what does it do? As it moves down, we are only trying to take the differential of what's changed. If you look at the first picture with the yellow box with the blue dots there, the blue dots are moving. The movement alone is captured, and what we call as a frame. This is like an animation. This is like almost like the animation that you've seen people draw and then run it. You'll see the whole movement happening. Exactly. So what we're doing is it's what we call a group of pictures. We are only trying to take picture snapshots at different points of time and stitching it together. That's what a video is all about. And what happens in this sort of scenario? If you look at it, this is what it is, right? So you create all these picture frames. And typically, this is about anywhere from 24 to 120 frames per second. That means you need the motion to be created. Obviously, the more the frames, the better the motion. Slower the frames, you will see the stutter in the motion. That's exactly what we do as a video. Why am I talking about videos? Because if you look at it now, think about the content needs for think about in your camera, on your phone that you have, every image that you capture is a frame. Now think about for a video, that becomes 24 times, that becomes one second worth of information. Now you talk about minutes and hours and tens and thousands of hours, you know that the content starts bloating up to become an extremely large set of storage. That's what happens today. And that's where cloud starts to really become important. I'll take an example of a scenario. Let's assume we are all on the right-hand side of this whole screen where we're watching content. You could be on television, mobile devices, iPads, phones, wherever you are, you're watching it. What happens is there are what's called web servers in the middle, which are streaming that to you. What is it streaming? It's streaming files to you saying, hey, do you want to watch something? That's what you get it. Today, when you're watching a video conferencing, exactly the same technologies are getting leveraged today to do that. What happens at the back end is there's a bunch of things, what's called an encoder, which is a core heart of things, which converts to different bit rates. So for all of us at home, so maybe you are watching on a mobile device, that means you have maybe a 5 Mbps, 10 Mbps connections. Somebody's on a fiber connection, they might have 100 Mbps connections. Somebody on a 2G phone would only have few hundreds of kbps connections. Now a video needs to work across all of this completely. So what happens in the back end is it prepares it in multiple different bit rates so that you can all watch it in the same fashion. So in a small screen, you can get a lower bit rate. On a larger screen, you want a higher bit rate. You can do all of that. What happens today is, let me give an example of this whole thing, right? Assuming you have 50,000 hours of content, so you have tons of content available. Now, on the other side, let's assume we have 10 million viewers. 10 million is not very large in the context of, I'm sure if you look at television in the country in India, a typical shows will be 100 million viewers be watching it. Not 10 million is actually small. But in the OTT world, it's fairly a large section of people who are watching it today. 10 million is a good number to start with. Now, if you look at it, a stream of 3 megabits per second. Let's say India, we have lower bandwidth. The people where we work across the US and others, it's about anywhere from 6 to 10 Mbps minimum. But in India, given the bandwidth restrictions, 3 Mbps is a good realistic stream. Now think about it, right? This alone, if I want to do 50,000 hours of content, our customers, for example, that we need stored in high resolutions, it's a petabyte of storage. And just 50,000 hours is not a big amount of content today. Just 1 petabyte of storage. A petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. Just so that people kind of get a perspective, this 1,000 terabytes, right? Now, I take this and I have to encode it, process it, and processing is typically 4 times the amount of content. So I just kind of give you a rough idea. It will take us 1 million CPU hours to compute all of this. 1 million CPU hours you want to really put in to kind of do these processing at the back end. And it will take us 13 terabytes per hour that I need to stream it back to you. So when you are watching at home, like all of us, millions of people are watching simultaneously. Maybe different content, same content, but they're all watching. Now, 13 terabytes per hour just for a 10 million viewership. We are a billion people, mind you. We're talking about 10 million people looking at it. That's the scale of this whole thing. And this is just this beginning of what's starting to happen. Now, this wouldn't have been done in the offline world. You couldn't have done it in offline world. You would just die because you don't have the sort of hardware you need. You don't need it every time. 1 million CPU hours. If you have a single machine at home, it'll take you 1 million hours literally to get what your job done. Doesn't make sense, right? So the factories at the back end allow you to do these sort of capabilities. For example, this is one example of how the scale starts to work here, right? Think about live events. It's changed a lot. And like what you're seeing right now, or what we see across sports and others, you can have tens of cameras from different locations, which is completely maybe on ground. You can have recorded content, ads coming from different locations, the graphics coming from different locations, commentators sitting at home. You have a complete remote environment, and with a browser, you can pretty much control all of this and actually build your systems today. So what happens is, what the cloud environments are providing is now sports and news and others don't need hardware, don't need on-prem offices. The office world is gone. We're talking about everything virtualized, software-centric. These are some of the use cases that are starting to happen. But the beauty is, once you have content, you can start to prepare a lot of things because you have the compute. Obviously, machine learning is not far behind. It starts to really come in because wherever this data, this machine learning and artificial intelligence clearly disrupting every business, media is not really far behind in that front. Technically, you can start to create what's called video analytics. That means you are starting to extract more information that's available in the video, which you didn't exist earlier. You can create your own highlights. You can create your thumbnails that you see on your OTT platforms. It creates promos. We're even seeing some of the machines even starting to do storytelling themselves. So in that sense, the machine learning models are getting evolved. Maybe it's time to start replacing a lot of the humans that we're actually doing today, for example. Just to give you a perspective, at Amagi, we did this and it was kind of interesting, is we created a machine model to do a sports highlights. We taught the machine how to handle soccer. So we give a soccer match. Today, it can actually generate the highlights itself. Obviously, it knows goals, fouls, injuries. It was able to extract all of that and create the highlights. So there goes an editor's job today, literally, if you look at it, is what a video editor used to do. And this happens at the speed of when the match completes, in the next minute, you have the highlights ready for somebody to consume. The power of these machines and the platforms, and because it's in the cloud, you can spin up machines, any number of machines in parallel. than what you could do it in an office environment. So software and cloud is changing these capabilities and mechanisms. Not that technology is new, but the application of this on a cloud environment is extremely starting to be very, very attractive and scaling things for you and disrupting the whole space. Like same with monitoring. Monitoring used to be a big challenge. If you look at any television channels, they have to monitor it 24/7. Huge amount of people, thousands of people work today in this monitoring stuff. But unfortunately, again, from a labor standpoint, it's unfortunate. But from a technology standpoint, it's starting to really replace things. There's no good reason for somebody to be watching content. Things are changing. You can actually automate all of these capabilities. Using machine learning starting to apply for all of these capabilities in real life today as we speak. This is just to give you a perspective. If you're trying to create a channel, if you look at any TV channel that you're watching on any of your platforms, or when you look at a sports match, this is to kind of not give you, this is not to get into technology, but to give you a complexity of what happens today. There are multiple blocks of things, and all of these are software blocks running on the cloud, interacting with each other, and creating a cohesive experience when we watch. When you click on a remote, or when you click on your screen, on a button, there's something happening in the backend. These are some of the, there is graphics rendering, the subtitle processing, there is audio related, video related, all of that come together and this is an engine and eventually provide you an experience, which is what we all watch and watch at home today, example, right? To sum up, one of the challenges in everything is simple things are the hardest at scale. It looks simple for all of us. The moment it's at scale, it becomes extremely hard. Simple, very simple things which you and me would have not thought as an important thing. And I'll give you an example of this, right? So take file transfer. All of us do it. We send a file to somebody, we could go on a Google Drive or on a Dropbox or whatever we do today. A file, for example, if it's a 1 hour of HD is high definition content, HD channels, for example, content, it would take us 18 hours on a 100 Mbps link. If you have 100 Mbps connection, which is not bad, it's a smaller connection, it takes 18 hours. If you look at it in some of these, the bottom you see LA to Singapore. That means we're talking about content traveling across the globe, about maybe 14,000 miles across the globe or 8,000 miles across the globe that you see here. But interestingly, technology doesn't allow us to scale. If you look at the other side, on the right-hand side, you see, even at 1 Gbps connection, what did we do? We increased it by 10 times. The connection speed is 10 times, but yet it takes the same 18 hours. The technology starts to break at scale. So what is our problem today is then there are companies which try to only solve this problem. For example, I've got, this is courtesy a company called Signiant, I've given it here, is this company and many companies like this are solving what's called file acceleration problem. This, I don't think if I'm in college, I would think, what is it? It's a file transfer. I can drag and drop my file and should go, but that is a business in itself. That is an industry in itself that actually is going, because the files are so large, the amount of content is so high, and the challenges are immense. So technologies are changing to do all of this. So that's the reason I said simple things can be extremely complex when you start to really do it at scale. And that's a challenge here for us. So again, just to give you, so it is a lot of technologies in the backend which actually drive all of these capabilities, right? Be it quite a bit of Kubernetes, graphics rendering, video pipelines, all the containers that you can think about. All the best-in-class cloud capabilities are needed to drive a factory at the backend. And that's what we do at Amagi, right? So or any other company in the media business would be doing is to creating these capabilities with tons and tons of technology and the new latest advances are beautiful. They help a lot in building these capabilities today from an industry standpoint. So this is driving a change, a big change in the industry. I'm sure you've seen it across other industries, but media is changing. And this is a factory that's actually getting built completely on a cloud-based infrastructure that's happening. So just a quick overview of the company itself. I work for Amagi, so I'm one of the co-founders. And Amagi, again, has been in the cloud TV business. We are the backend. We are doing what I've shown you are all the things that we work on. And that's a fun stuff because we are actually working with companies to kind of build it. It's been an extremely satisfying journey. It's been growing very well. We're seeing this transformation. We're pioneering this whole capability across the globe today. And we work with multiple customers, I think Sujit talked about, quite a bit of who's who of every other thing that you could think of in the world in terms of media entertainment. We work with them. But the fun part is the technology which comes in and how the disruptions can happen, the differentiations, and what we can do for our customers is what keeps us all really excited going forward. So that's kind of a small peek into the factory, the backend. And I would turn it to Sujit, back again, Sujit.
Yeah, so interesting. Fascinating, actually. Bhaskar, I mean, it's the same for whether it's satellite or cable TV and all that, the same as OTT. I mean, how does the process exactly work for them? Satellite?
So what we're seeing, Sujit, what we're seeing is if you look at any TV channel worldwide, or TV or content owner today, I don't think they can survive thinking that they're going to be a cable or satellite channel or OTT channel. So what everybody's doing is creating a back end or a factory which can handle distribution of content anywhere you want. It could be OTT, it could be cable, it could be satellite. So what I've shown you here is exactly the same for any broadcaster. Does not matter how they distribute the content. Incidentally, the last mile is a satellite or a Tata Sky platform or an Airtel platform or a Dish TV platform or a Hathway at homes, or it could be an Amazon Prime or a Netflix, or you're looking at channels on a Hotstar. You do that, but the back end is exactly the same because how we process content, how we manage it is all exactly the same.
Okay, okay. Bhaskar, can you remove that screen share that
Yes, please.
the presentation? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So just a reminder to the audience: the chat box is open on Facebook. You can send in your questions through that. I already got one question. Let me actually take that. It's interesting. Since it's from Kiran Rathod. He's a producer and actor. With SaaS solutions from providers like you, how easy or difficult is it to start an OTT platform?
Okay, relatively easy. And again, it's a question of really coming together with what sort of platform are you trying to build. The base platforms are relatively easy today. You can bring it up, given all these SaaS capabilities and with a bunch of ecosystem providers that we know of. We've seen customers coming up with the whole platform in possibly 6 to 8 weeks. They're able to bring it up and actually get their whole solutions working today. So it's really a question of preparation. And then it's about branding and marketing, which is important. Technology itself is something that you can actually bring it up relatively quickly.
Okay. And the traditional systems, would it have taken longer?
It would have been taking much longer, because if you want to really prepare this, typically this would have been a 1 year sort of project. Now you shrink it to maybe 8 weeks largely.
Really?
And we have seen, yeah, for example, again, give you a customer, for example, if you take linear channels, creation a sports channel to be launched, it will typically take 6 months to a year for sports channel to prepare and do things, buy equipment, do all of that setup and all of that. At Amagi, people have done it in 2 weeks. Same job.
Wow.
So that's sort of the speeds at which we can think.
I kept seeing this word linear channel. What is a linear channel? Just for my
A linear channel is a collection of creating a 24-hour schedule of content.
Oh, like that.
That's a linear channel. Or it could be live sports. Live sports is always linear because you're watching it in real time as an unscheduled appointment view, for example. Okay. And we call it VOD for all the on-demand channels where you're actually watching, like what we watch in a Hotstar or Netflix today, our content already prepared and ready to be served. Those are two differentiations we do from an industry standpoint. Yes.
Okay. Ashish, I'll come to you, but before that, Bhaskar, I just want to ask you also, I mean, adoption of these kind of technologies, is it more in the West, or India is also taking to it? To what extent?
I think it started off in the West, Sujit, fundamentally because I think the internet infrastructure was a very critical part of this whole evolution. And obviously, cloud infrastructure was also very advanced in terms of what happened. Having said that, this 4 years back, cloud is very mature, starting to get mature in the US, and we're seeing that maturity. But right now, India, for example, is being fantastic in terms of the maturity of the infrastructure that's starting to happen. All the cloud vendors have their data centers here. Costs have come down. Internet infrastructure at homes have started to become extremely good, at least in the most of the urban and the next set of tier towns that we see, tier 2 towns today, for example. So I think it's changing a lot, and cloud adoption is starting to happen big time across Asia. And we're seeing India is also an exciting new market that's evolving for us.
Okay. In terms of content and all that, is there something you can give an example in terms of what would what is not possible for people who do not adopt this kind of technologies?
Okay, let me take a classic example, right? So let's assume Australian Open is running right now, right? So Australian Open, in a real world, I'm sure all of us, when we're watching television or even in OTT platforms today, if you want to produce the live content of Australian Open, in the pre-quarterfinals, you would have had about maybe 16 matches happening simultaneously. I'm sure all of us would have watched. You'll get a small peek of highlights of every match. The reason that's happening is amount of equipment you need to produce that matches are you might have only 2 equipments literally, or 2 mechanism of production of that content. Now, because why is that? Because it's millions of dollars of equipment that you're going to buy. I don't want to buy it for few days of a 16-match event, because eventually it's semifinals and finals are going to be 1 each, for example. I don't need to buy so much of equipment. But on a cloud infrastructure, and again, what's changed, right? Also, our user preferences have changed a lot. For example, I'm just giving you, I'm sitting in Denmark. I'm just taking an example in Netherlands. and I have a Danish player playing in the first match in Australia. I would love to see it full time live because it's a big thing for a country, and for their nation, for their player to even play in the first match in a Australian Open is as good as important. I would want to consume that content. Now that's what the OTT world is important because it's democratized all of us to watch that content. Television did exist because of the satellite bandwidth always limited it. OTT, I can spin up a channel. Number one. So consumer side got democratized. But more importantly, like the technologies we provide today, for example, we provide a mechanism on what's called SaaS model. That means we are telling customers, okay, you want to do a live event, spin up that live infrastructure for producing content only for that hours of the match. Why do you want to buy an equipment hardware? You don't need to do it on demand, only buy for 16 different matches happening in one day. You want it, spin it up for that day. Spin it down the next day, you're not paying anything money. So the whole metered model, a subscription model, dramatically changes the dynamics of what you can do. Suddenly that Dutch player is covered full time on a 3-hour match that he or she is playing. And all of that's actually coming to Netherlands for people to watch it, which wouldn't have been possible. And if you look at Olympics this year, it's going to be extremely exciting because this is the first Olympics where you're going to see hundreds of different streams coming back live, where you're going to see every player, every nation. So you're a Turkish player or even an Indian wrestler or a boxer, for example, your match is going to be covered fully live and given to that audience who want to consume it, independent of whether you're in the quarterfinals or in the finals or even the track heats that you're actually running. We want to know it. We are Indians. We want our Indian track and field players to be looked at and watched and cheered online. That's the big change that will happen, which was not possible in the world which is not without a cloud, right? That's the big change.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Earlier, you just had a few channels. We could watch only those events
Absolutely.
that they showed.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay. Very interesting. Shilpa?
We have a lot of questions coming in. This one is from Samshwi. How does the last mile delivery differ from TV and OTT platforms? As one is over cable DTH and the other is over the internet.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Right. So what happens today, right? When a content is getting prepared, after the preparation of content, and let's take a channel or a sports match that we are watching, the sports comes on a satellite. And how does it work? Satellites work. A Star or a Z or a Colors or whoever it is, right? Whoever is actually running a sports match, for example, today, beams that content to a satellite, and the satellite actually delivers to multiple cable and DTH platforms. And cable, for example, a Hathway is a cable vendor. For example, I don't know if some of you at home will have it, or a Tata Sky or an Airtel, for example, it's a DTH vendor. So they access the content and eventually come back to our homes. They are the last mile provider. All of us pay a fee, a subscription fee to these people who provide what we call as a pay TV operator. They come and actually get money from us. A cable operator or a DTH operator is paying money, what we're paying money for. They come through satellite. So the stream goes from a TV channel to an operator, and from the operator comes to our homes either through a wire, a cable that's come to our home, or through the satellite dish antennas, the small antennas that exist in our homes today. That's on the cable satellite. In the internet world, everything is happening on the IP link. Your ISP is giving you a connection. What we do is we are actually pulling content. Unlike the world where in broadcasting, in satellite or cable, you're pushing content. That means you're pushing the content blindly, saying, hey, all of you can watch it. Whoever has access to this content can watch it. That's the way it works. In the internet world, each one of us are pulling a stream, what we call unicast in our technical lingo. But what you're trying to do, each one of us are pulling. It comes with its challenges. It comes with its opportunities. Opportunity is I can now customize and personalize it for each one of us. That's the reason if you look at advertising, for example, it's changing a lot. In fact, Amagi and a lot of companies like ours are driving personalized advertising. That means each one of us will see a different ad. We've seen it on YouTube, we've seen it in others, but we're seeing this change happening very, very customized, personalized for each one of us. That's happening. Communication is becoming personalized. It's not a broadcast model, but really unicast, one at a time that we're trying to really look at. So IP connections provide that. But the back end, also the flip side of it is disadvantages. If as I told you, a 10 million subscribers or 100 million subscribers start to watch it, you are having 100 million people to be served one at a time in some sense. That's tremendous amount of power and compute and storage we need to address. So a lot of innovations are happening in terms of trying to bring it further optimized and being able to provide that sort of scale that television provides today. We are not yet there, but I think in the next few years, maybe in the next couple of years, you will see scale which will be as good or better than the television scales that we're seeing. in terms of viewerships. That's what we see.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Very
I have some
interesting.
audience questions, but before that, Ashish, audience typically, they all love job-related questions, skills-related stuff. And many of them who watch are youngsters who are trying to see where they can reskill and all that. So, tell us, what kind of skills does this industry require? What kind of skills do you hire? And what is the opportunities generally in the coming years, do you think?
Sure. So, as Bhaskar said, a lot of opportunity in the cloud space, and we're actually hiring both from people who have had no experience but are fresher technology folks from engineering backgrounds, to experienced developers who are there and who have experience in large-scale cloud systems, and maybe a couple of years of experience, to large amount of experience in the same. And the space is developing, so there is the whole amount of folks who have experience in legacy systems, whereas you have some folks now who are getting certified with different kinds of important certifications available in the market, like certifications offered by large cloud providers such as AWS Architect or Google Cloud certifications and so on, which are actually adding to the skills which are already available to folks who are there in the market. But I think primarily for us, what we look at is strong fundamentals. So when we are looking at hiring techies or hiring engineers, we are looking at people who are very strong in their programming fundamentals. And that can be as basic as C programming, C and C++ programming, to a variety of other, and your knowledge of languages, programming languages, is an added advantage, but it doesn't put you at the helm. Your strong fundamentals, knowledge of data and algorithms is something which actually gets you across, because getting into Amagi itself is not a cakewalk. We have a hiring process which goes longer, and you are really tested into your fundamentals more than testing you on your knowledge of programming languages per se. But yes, knowledge of programming languages like a Python is very, very useful in today's world for front end. So you have back end programmers, you have front end programmers, and you have full stack who work across the entire breadth. And skills are different. Your skills in Python, your skills in Java. For front end, you have skills in Node.js, React.js, and so on. So these kind of different technologies which are existing, and they continuously update. But I think we are looking for folks who are very strong in fundamentals. Second, who are passionate in the field of technology, passionate in the field of cloud, and who are passionate about video. I think Bhaskar mentioned a lot about video. Our entire thing is about video and OTT. If folks who are passionate and want to work in the space of video, yes, our doors are always open for them. So that's in the space of software development. And then of course, yes, this extends to, in the space of testing or QA, which is an additional to software development. Then you have, in cloud itself is a very exciting space. So you have opportunities in cloud security, you have opportunities in cloud operations, and several other newer kind of opportunities which are actually coming up. So DevOps kind of roles which are actually coming up in the cloud space as well. So all of these exciting newer roles which are also appearing in the cloud space now in India. Earlier probably would have had difficulty in finding people who are experienced in this, but now we are finding a lot. So a lot of opportunities, and our firm is actually hiring across all of these roles, plus roles in product management and in UX and some of these other areas. So yes, that's all the skills you can look for.
This specific kind of industry, that you have created in some sense, how do you see that progressing in India, and what opportunities for talent there?
Yes, I think so. You're saying media technology specifically. Yeah, I think that. So as Bhaskar mentioned, I think this cloud and media combination, it's very, very exciting because there's so much which can be done in the media space from a backend, from a cloud perspective itself. Earlier probably physical infrastructure would take the cake, but in the last 1 or 2 years, and especially in a bad environment like COVID, I think we've gone the other way around. We've just realized that physical infrastructure is not as important as when you are on the cloud, and we've been like all safe in our operations, and our business has been growing from a cloud perspective. So yes, I think media technology as a sector is definitely attractive for a whole lot of people to actually come in here. Fundamentals again in cloud, in programming, if they are strong enough, I think they can be applied to any kind of sectors across as programmers. But yeah, a passion for video, and if you have experience in the video and OTT world, I think that's a big added advantage. because that's the space which is really revolutionizing in terms of, we used to watch TV and now it's a lot of OTT, it's on demand, and linear is going to take on even more after this. So I think that's going to be an exciting space coming on.
Bhaskar, what is there space for more such companies like yours in India itself, or what?
Absolutely, Sujat. I think I think we're just scratching the surface of what it is today, right? And I think like what Ashish talked about, one of the things in the media tech space, Sujat, that we're looking at is this is not a skill that traditionally available in India. I think none of us, you wouldn't have heard of a lot of media tech companies, maybe outside of maybe some of the television networks who are investing in technology. There are no media tech companies per se, which is like hardcore system technologies that we're actually building at scales of cloud scale that we need and all of that. And that's been a challenge as well, right? So essentially what we think is also the talent pool in India is get the core talent pool. And I think we have very good, brilliant engineering talent in the country. And it's really about building the skill sets in terms of media aspects that needs to come in. And the company has a lot of critical mass in terms of already good expertise. We're world class in the leadership in terms of our customers really look forward to us in terms of leading and this technology elements. I feel for people joining us and what we see in this, they get to kind of become experts, world-class experts, competing against anybody across the globe, right? So India is bereft of talent today from a media tech standpoint, but I think we need a lot more companies trying to do this, and there's enough space across the globe. We've all become global businesses. It's not about now the countries don't, and every border is open literally from a global standpoint. So that's the scale at which I think there's opportunities for everybody.
Okay.
And also wanted to add to that, one is how Bhaskar is saying in media, the amount of investment which we are putting as an organization just to develop skills in the cloud aspect itself for most of our folks who are joining us is very high as well. So, hire folks for us, it's all about hiring folks who are very strong in fundamentals. And yes, capability we can build in the cloud space, we can build capability, we can invest and build in them. And as Bhaskar is mentioning, even in the media space, since we are experts in that space, we can actually build those capabilities. But for us, I think the fundamental stage at building, at attracting talent is strong computer fundamentals, strong programming fundamentals, a penchant for technology. I think that's something which stands out for us when we attract talent.
Okay.
Do you think, Ashish, this has actually set off a new kind of a talent war, especially with cloud providers hiring aggressively in the market?
It has, definitely has. And, India, there was a question earlier, we said that, which side is evolving more, and US as a market had developed quite a lot over the last couple of years. I think US has been a very strong market in the cloud space. It has developed, and now, and we've always looked at Western markets earlier, and then we've got those capabilities which we're building. And over the last 3 to 4 years, I think a huge amount of talent space has been created in the cloud market for us. And people are picking on and listening on to others, looking at these kind of organizations and building their capabilities in the cloud space as well, with all of these certifications which are coming on. So yes, it's created a war for talent, and yes, I mean, companies are finding it difficult to attract and retain talent as well. So using things, and what we actually do as an organization is we believe in investing in our talent quite a lot. So one is, of course, attract and get best kind of talent, but invest in them from a capability perspective, and keep them engaged in the kind of work which we give them. So anytime you take feedback from a lot of folks who've joined us and who've spent around 2 to 3 years, I think the number one factor which stands out for them in terms of their engagement at Amagi is the kind of work which they do. They will just, and probably they'll not be able to put it in terms of the number, in terms of English or in terms of words, but they will actually be able to explain in terms of what kind of apps they've created or what kind of work they do on a day-to-day basis, which makes an impact on the customer. So I think that part, and creating a good amount of great passionate work for them, which keeps them engaged in their day-to-day life. I think that's something which we use to keep folks engaged. And yes, and the other aspects are what I spoke of earlier. So investing in their capabilities, making them stronger. I think that's something which helps us keep alive in this war, as you mentioned.
And again, Shilpa, from my perspective, I think it's a golden age for engineers. It does not matter Amagi or otherwise, right? It's an ecosystem that's evolving, the market's evolving. I think we've got maturity. We have large scale companies out of India, be it in e-commerce or be it in all possible domains that we've seen. Young folks built fantastic companies in the country. I think in that sense, it's built out a talent pool, which is extremely confident, extremely talented, And I think anybody who is ready to build their talent, ready to learn, solve problems in life, I think there's enough opportunities for all of us. And I think that's good for the whole economy. I see it as a more broader, beautiful trend that's happening. Yes, it's a talent war from companies, but that's all too small in an ecosystem of what we as a country. I think it's a beautiful thing that's happening. It's giving opportunities I think none of us would have imagined or experienced maybe even a decade back. I think that's what's happening.
You think
I
your
like that
approach to
golden age
hiring is
for
also
engineers.
different
I
because,
think one of the reasons.
yeah, yeah. So Bhaskar, your
Yeah, sorry,
approach to
Shilpa, go on, go
hiring,
on, go on.
very different hiring approach for campuses and laterals because you're creating a new skills taxonomy. So, how is it different in terms of hiring talent?
See, again, what we are seeing is we do not focus on a particular experience of because it is hard. So people don't understand the media business as much as what it is today, and we don't expect them to understand the technology and what happens before that. So what we have, I think first principles don't change a lot, Shilpa. That's what we've learned in our lives is 25 years back, the skill sets and what you need skill sets. It's not about programming languages, these are like, we do not really focus on programming language because that is a way to express to the computer, it's not a skill set in itself. So a lot of, I tell a lot of youngsters who come and say, okay, I'm actually good in Python or a Java. Actually, it's actually irrelevant because languages change and we've seen it. It changes it's a flavor of the season in some sense. But our understanding of how to express to a machine and make it work, the fundamentals have not changed dramatically since 1965 when it started off with, and what we are seeing today. Quite a bit of there are models, design patterns. So what we focus on are people who have a more in-depth understanding of computing fundamentals, understanding the art of software development. So it's not about things, right? Building at scale. How do I build concurrency? How do I build redundant systems? So looking at it more, I would call it more a spiritual way of looking at software, not at a skill set level saying, oh, I know Java, I know, they're all really relevant in a larger scheme of things. And we look for longer term relationships. So we look for real good fundamentals. And like what I think Ashish is talking about, core compute fundamentals. We don't care about languages. In fact, you can write it in a pseudocode or any language of your choice, doesn't matter, literally. In fact, that's the way our tests are. We never talk about programming languages. Second, we're seeing is problem solving skills. Quite a bit of, so people should be able to solve problems. Real life is all about problem solving. We are at the bleeding edge of technology. We are at a point where you have to solve new problems. So we really focus on that. Third is really learnability. We tell people, get your textbooks, keep it, or you should be online trying to learn things because life is changing, we changing, everybody changes. So learnability is important. So experience actually doesn't matter because as much as really the learnability keeps us, the curiosity of a child is needed for you to really keep yourself abreast. And that is something we look at. We look for inquisitiveness and curiosity in your learnability capabilities. These are the traits we look at. I'm sorry, I'm not able to give you a skill set answer, but that's not what you look at actually, unfortunately.
No, interesting because this is what we keep hearing from people like you, learnability and curiosity. I mean, that seems to be a major thing now. I mean, yeah, instead of what particular languages do you know and stuff like that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a question that's been pending for a while. This is from Dibyendu. What is Amagi's view on the impact of PM Vani, PM Wi-Fi Access Network Interface Program?
No, I think, okay, just to, if you look at it, and again, not as Amagi, as an individual, I think more access to internet. Internet is a democratizing platform for all of us. I think both for education, entertainment, any sort of informational aspect, I think internet is to democratize our population, democratize everybody to be able to access everything in an equal fashion. I think it's one of the largest and the best tool to address it. I think what I think Prime Minister is doing here and what the government's doing this, I think it's extremely fantastic, right? If you're able to bring access to every child in this country to be able to access it for primarily for education and then for entertainment or information, for example, I think is an extremely compelling opportunity. I think it's not about business. It's just about, I think as a country, we need it. And I think that's in the right direction.
Shilpa?
We have this question. Is Amagi working on AI ML-based solutions for censorship of content?
Absolutely, yes, we do. And obviously, censorship is a very, very tricky subject in terms of, because it actually is very deeply embedded. I don't know if you folks have a lot of discussions today in AI ML is all about biases. what is negative, what is fake, what is something that, and again, censorship is at the heart of that whole thing. What you censor, again, and we work across nations, right? We work international. The sensitivities are extremely different in terms of cultural, because it actually goes to our deep down into our culture and our civilizations in some sense, right? So you need a more deeper understanding of how do you do censorships. Machine learning from a technology standpoint has evolved, but I don't think we understand the technologies enough to control these censorships in a very meaningful fashion. Why I'm telling you that is because of the biases that we actually add as humans, right? Again, the machine is only going to do what you are actually asking it to be trained. The training set in a machine learning model decides how effective is the censorship. There are two challenges in that. The biases that get into the model, which is what's impacting how the censorship happens. Second is there are regulatory constraints. Today, for example, a machine makes a mistake, and machine learning is in itself as a beast today. In some sense, I don't think we understand how to control as humans. We don't understand what to be the output of it. We cannot predict what it's going to. We cannot. Nobody in the world can tell you 100% of the time the machine learning model is going to work exactly the way you want it to work. That's a challenge. It comes with the challenge of uncertainties. So what happens if something is extremely a sensitive topic in a country, and that goes out into the media or a video or whatever you're watching, and that I'm not able to track it, becomes an extremely hard problem. Having said that, if you look at any of the large user-generated content models, be it a YouTube or a Facebook or anybody, it becomes an extremely important tool for you to do a mass-scale censorships or specific biases that you can actually extract. It's important as well. So the machines are working today, and it's already a norm across the industry. Can we guarantee a regulatory approval on top of it doing it? It's going to be a big challenge for the industry, and we are part of it. We work, yes, we work on AML models. We've actually explored models which will allow us to do things as well. Yes, absolutely.
I have a related question. I mean, it's talking about a more broader thing on AI. Qasim Mohammed asking this question. Can you touch upon a few areas within the media sector where you think AI will play a huge part in the coming years? So apart
Absolutely.
from censorship, what are the other areas?
Yeah, quite a bit of things, right? So for example, AI starts to play starting from, again, I'll tell you the sort of sequences that's happening, right? People are thinking, can I really generate the story itself through an AI systems? So there are companies which are only looking at, can I create a movie out of AI? Obviously today, for example, characters, now with augmented realities and what's happening, you can actually create actors pretty much. I'm sure you've seen a lot of the fake news happening. For example, technology and the GAN networks, which is part of the machine learning model repertoire of things that you have. Technologies today can create actors completely synthetically. You don't need humans to do that. That's the first step. There are things which are actually creating stories themselves. And I'm sure, for example, there are machines which actually written stories, which I look at as good as humans.
Really?
It's very hard for you to discern whether it's a human written. So for example, people did what's called a Turing test of saying, if you look at a story, can you tell us whether it's a human driven or a machine written or human written? You cannot identify that. So the advancement technology is coming to that level. The third aspect is media processing, right? A lot of processing today of thousands of hours of content coming in. For example, extracting metadata. How do I know what's the genre of a content? Genre meant in early days, we all said, oh, there's entertainment content or a sports or a news. Today, customers ask me, can I know what are the Indonesian food? Can I only look at Indonesian food? Can I look at Thai specific stuff? So I wanted this dance form that I want to talk about. Now we have that sort of capability to go through hundreds of thousands of hours of content and get you extract clips of it only for that capability, for example. Now, and for example, right, and one of my channel partners, when I was talking to them, they wanted to get the Diana's wedding videos out of it. It's 25 years before, more than that today. How do I get into a repository and get it? They actually applied machine learning. The machine learning models could identify Diana's face across the whole lifetime, go back into, maybe they had tens of thousands of hours of content. It could pick that clip up and they could bring it on a television screen or a news channel, for example. In less than 5 minutes, all of this happened. Think about this wouldn't have been unviable in the days that we were there, right? It wouldn't have happened, for example. Those are capabilities. We are seeing, for example, face recognition is becoming obviously a norm, right? Object and faces become norm today. You could, for example, we've been talking to customers saying, if you're watching a soccer match and you're seeing Messi on screen, you could technically have a game today. For example, hey, do you think Messi is going to score a goal today? You can have a game, interactive game that you can set up. These are things which are enhancing the experience of the audience because of machine learning coming into the capabilities that's happening. Yes, it's doing a lot of the hard work, but it's also trying to extract insights which would have been hard or impossible in the earlier days. That's happening as well. So quite a bit of exciting things happening from an ML space. I talked about highlights in my presentation. So you can create highlights, you can create promo. So for example, a lot of movie promos or video promos can be created. So you could give it a 3-hour movie. It can find out, for example, we are actually researching with some of the institutes in India country today to create natural language processing systems, which can actually extract and create a summary of a video. So can I take, if you give me a video, can I tell you the story in a summarized fashion? So we are actually doing that research. We're not yet there, but we are actually progressing towards those sort of capabilities today.
Considering that you are processing large amounts of data, how has the role of your IT teams evolved because they're handling so much data?
Okay, so IT, I think the concept of an IT has kind of transformed itself into more of DevOps and site reliability capabilities engineering. So it's not the regular vanilla IT, somebody sitting in your office and trying to look at an email or connecting your computers today. That's gone literally. So these are largely programmatic options today. Cloud is at a point where you need automation for everything. You cannot run. For example, we run maybe thousands of servers, and maybe in some days it goes to tens and thousands of servers. So it peaks and demands peak. How do you even manage tens of thousands of servers as a human? You cannot do that. It's not just physically impossible from a. So all today, what happens is the environment is building tools and technologies to control these beasts, not by monitoring them, because you cannot do that on a one at a time today. So the IT role has changed a lot, become DevOps roles, becomes what are called site reliability engineering roles. So it's transforming a lot more in terms of being more programmatic and software centric. And so the regular IT admin roles have transformed a lot, Shilpa, in that sense.
Okay.
We have some questions. Yeah, you want to go, Sujit?
No, go ahead.
This one is from Kasim. Are there any significant changes happening in content creation practices which media professionals who want to pursue the careers or content creators need to be trained in?
Yeah, multiple things are happening. I think content creation is getting into what I call a mixed mode realities today, right? So one is, I think the best in class, what we used to do is really doing, okay, we used to kind of shoot a video, then add some graphics, and we were ready to go. Today, if you look at it, graphics is like a norm. So you can actually add any sort of graphics and real-time graphics. More importantly, we're talking about augmented realities. So you can actually, augmentation of the whole environments are starting to happen. I don't, if you look at, if you're producing content, you should look at what's called depth cameras today. This is exactly like the LiDAR cameras. I'm sure iPhone 12 Pro has it today on a consumer device, but you have LiDAR cameras coming in even in the production environments. What it allows you to have depth information. So technically, if you look at it, I could create mechanisms where I can have a very augmented reality where I can have objects in front of you and behind you, and I can create environments which are completely part virtual and part real. And it is so real that you might not, as a consumer, you will not even realize that that's actually things that actually happening in a very different fashion today. And big things are already happening remotely. I think a lot of good innovations happening during the COVID days. Given a lockdown, I think a lot of people are trying to produce content in remote locations and trying to stitch it together. Today, for example, there's possibilities, and in fact, a lot of people have shown that you can create a virtual world where people are in different locations, you can act, and they can be in the same scene that you can create. And these were all, I think, high-five technologies for the movie world is now available at the hands of producers sitting on an internet browser and be able to control and be able to do that. So that's sort of the capabilities and advancement that's available today.
So you're saying people are sitting in different places and you can...
They're on the same scene.
Same scene.
Yeah, you can. Correct, absolutely. I don't know if you've seen the Netflix had a show with Obama, and there was a show right now. You should see that show actually, where they were completely in remote locations. But when you watch it, they are in the same room, talking with a fireplace in the middle. So all of that's created remotely. So they were like, I think 500,000 miles away from each other, but yet it looked like a room. You're actually thinking that both of them are sitting together and having a face-to-face conversation, but they're not there, literally. So we are getting into a world which is going to be extremely hard to differentiate reality and what is artificial or what's real. I think that's scary as well as exciting.
I know, fascinating. This go on, Shilpa, go on.
No, I just wanted to ask Ashish, because it's such a dynamic, evolving space. What are the opportunities that Amagi provides for upskilling and reskilling your staff?
Okay, so thanks for that question, Shilpa. We have a very open learning and development policy. While I mentioned that we are looking at taking people who are strong in their fundamentals and then building their capability. So we go on both paradigms. So one is technical, as one is behavioral, and we invest a lot in building capabilities on both these fronts for people. But we also want people to own their learning and development on themselves. So while every person in the organization has an individual development plan, which is started out by their managers basis what is their strengths and what are their development gaps, which have to be built over the year. Now, these gaps can be technical, these gaps can also be behavioral, which are very, very important for us as well as an organization, because we have certain expected behaviors we expect everyone to demonstrate, something like collaboration or something like innovation, which we want to drive overall for the organization. So thinking big or thinking different, which are some of our pillars which we have as an organization. And we want to know how every manager is driving that within their own teams and building those capabilities within their own team. So even in our learning and development policy, we incentivize some of these things as well. So while managers are free to do this for their individuals, and individuals themselves are free to go and take on courses on online available platforms which are there in the open, like Udemy or Coursera, go and sign up for a course and just get it reimbursed directly. I mean, there is no limit to amount of the courses or the amount of material which you can actually take up for L&D. We have an open hand at that, as long as it's there in your development plan and it's been discussed with your manager. So we are quite open on that. We also incentivize things like facilitating trainings within Amagi, and incentivizing stuff like innovation. So how do we do that? We incentivize things like writing blogs or articles, filing patents, and working in the space of technology. So that's something which is very, very core to us, because innovation is at the core of our organization. So the amount of folks who are actually contributing white papers or actually contributing blogs, articles, they are gaining plus points and brownie points in their entire process at Amagi itself. So while we want folks to own their learning and development, somewhere we also want to incentivize the fact that okay, these are certain behaviors we are building in the firm, and when newcomers join the organization, we also want them to see that as part of our culture and grow with the organization.
Interesting.
The pandemic saw lots of people shifting to OTT. How did that impact the business?
So we were on the lucky side of things, Sujit. And again, I know it's unfortunate for the globe what happened, but as a business, because it's a media business, like you rightly pointed out, I think people working from home, the amount of content consumption started increasing rapidly. And this is a worldwide phenomenon. Everybody started watching content a lot more than what I think they're watching in a work day, typical work day, for example. Just to give you perspective, some of our platforms grew 10 times from last December to this December. 10 times growth was seen, and that's like dramatic growth, which I don't think we would have anticipated without some sort of an impact. But interestingly, what we're seeing, Sujit, is going forward also we're seeing this because it's a new norm, a behavior that's happened, and the setting in place almost like we would have thought maybe March, April, May, you're going to see a bump, and then you're going to see some dip. But we didn't see the dip. It just continues to grow and continues to see that. I think it's now become a behavioral aspect. I think somebody's telling me that if you do something for 100 days, then that's the norm, that you're going to start to do that. I think as a society, as a civilization, as humans, we're starting to get into a new norm, consciously or unconsciously, to that realm. So we're seeing this as a one-way street of consumption that's starting to happen. And India has been particularly high. And same thing in the US, for example, we've seen these markets really suddenly come up. And we never knew that we had the sort of internet bandwidth in this country today. Yeah. I don't think we've always talked about internet bandwidth as a challenge, but suddenly, magically, come March 15th, all of us transformed, became internet workers, and suddenly we're ready to go and consume everything from entertainment to stuff. And thanks to a lot of the telcos and others who kind of enabled that for us.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, Shilpa, you did the InMobi story yesterday, today, day before. Massive increases in India, especially. Yeah.
Correct. Absolutely.
So, what stops anybody, existing guys, to kind of not shift to cloud-based system? Just that they've invested all this money into infrastructure, which.
Yes, typically, again, most of the broadcast, I don't think there is any broadcaster or a TV or a content owner in the world who's not saying, oh, I'll not move to the cloud. I think that days are gone. The only question is when, not really should I? And the when question is driven by, like you rightly pointed out, is my tech refresh cycles. I've already spent maybe tens of millions of dollars. When should I move that out of the cloud? What are my business exigencies which are driving those changes, for example? And again, thanks to, I think, this particular impact that's happened in the globe, a lot of them have started accelerating their plans because they found out that, see, the disaster in those early days was when some buildings used to go down, fire used to happen in a building, all of that. The disaster that we saw right now is people couldn't get into the buildings, which was a kind of a very unique disaster. And that kind of drove a lot of change. It's not like putting another building, which would have solved this problem because people couldn't get in. So cloud is the most native way to solve it. So for example, our customers, starting on the day pre-COVID to post-COVID, nothing changed for them because everything is on the cloud, everything on the browser. You could sit at home, do the exact thing that you did in your office. Nothing really changed. That gave in a realization, which is extremely compelling, that a lot of the TV channels woke up and said, okay, maybe that's what we need to do. So huge amount of bump in terms of people starting to, the mindset has changed a lot. That's what I feel.
Okay, yep. Fascinating. Shilpa, anything else? I think we are out of, 7 o'clock.
Yeah. Just wanted to understand from you, we have reaction videos, fans interacting live with players, So how do you think that's posing newer set of challenges because it's all real time, it's more reality TV. So what are the challenges that it brings to the table?
It brings multiple challenges, Shilpa. One is because, today, if you look at it, consumers want to access everything now. That means really now. Whatever's happening on a field or somewhere, it could be thousands of kilometers away, but I want to see it now and then, right? And you're talking about multitude of different dimensions. We've seen television obviously innovating, but with OTT, you're going to see hundreds of different where I can have specific fan related commentaries, or I can have in a dugout, for example. I want to know what's happening in the dugout, for example, the drama happening in the backstage, for example, or a back room, for example. Those are all exciting things that are happening. In fact, we have some of our customers looking at only creating what's called a backstage for US Open. Everything, what's happening behind the scene. They are not on the show, right? You don't see you don't see on the field where it's happening, but everything behind the scenes. And I can tell you, it's extremely fascinating in terms of what's happening. And these are all real-time commentaries coming in from different things. If you add this to the commentaries that you're watching on the screen, it gives you a very different perspective and an experience that's coming in. So we are, for example, creating compelling offerings to produce content which can actually meld these two together. Because you're getting something which is almost like an amateurish content because it's happening behind the scenes, people are running around trying to get things. Then how do you kind of coalesce it with really production ready content coming on the sports on a field and try to bring it together? Again, commentaries are changing. Commentary used to be, we all wanted to hear Sunil Gavaskar speaking or Ravi Shastri speaking. Now, for example, we had customers who said, I want, there are created social content commentary creators, for example. I can create a funny comment about the whole cricket match as a live commentary, for example, and I can intersperse it along with it. In OTT world, it's real. For example, you could choose a commentator that you want to work with. And I could be a social commentator because like a user-generated content, I'm a funny guy. Maybe I can do a better commentary than what I think Harsha Bhogle could do. Then I could do that today. The democratization of platform is extremely compelling to do all those capabilities.
Okay, we'll finish with this one last question, which has come from Mohammed. In OTT, advertising is highly personalized, whereas in linear broadcast, it is kind of mass-oriented. How are the advertising spend patterns changing because of this difference?
There is a shift that's happening, and worldwide shift that's happening. In fact, if you look at it, obviously, I think it's slam dunk for people to understand. If it's targeted, that means it's more valuable, lesser in terms of wastage that we're trying to do. So what we're seeing is a shift. Earlier, it was very hard. If you look at 2 years back, television is such a compelling platform. See, two things works for advertisers. Obviously, one is targeting, which means we are retargeting the right demographics, which is good. But you also wanted reach. Television provided a reach which was kind of unmatched. And if you look at it, if I'm, for example, I always tell people, if I'm a soap manufacturer, I want to reach everybody who's taking a bath. I'm not here to really delineate only few people who are. So if you tell me that I'm going to identify 100 people who are actually taking bath every day and giving you an ad, it's not relevant for me. If you tell me I'm going to get to 100 million people, out of which 50 million will be taking bath, I'm sure is a much more compelling proposition. Yes, targeting works, but targeting works at a scale. So now what OTT platforms are doing is saying, I can get you 50 million people who are all taking bath, and that's 50 million exact that I can get you, instead of the 100 million that television used to provide. That's giving me reach and giving me targeting, and that's a big change. And that's what dollars are starting to really drive towards. And that's what we're seeing, that whole change that's happening across the globe today.
Okay. Fascinating, no? The kind of things that are happening, unbelievable. Yeah, just a few years ago, we couldn't have thought of some of these things. But such an interesting discussion. Thanks so much, Bhaskar. Thanks, Ashish. Wonderful having you.
Definitely.
So I'm sure these things will become more and more exciting in times to come.
Absolutely.
We'll
Absolutely.
probably meet again soon. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Sujit and Shilpa.
Bye.
Thank you for this opportunity.
So much,
Thank you.
Bhaskar and Ashish.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.